Let's look at section 2.8, adding integers. So we're going to look at adding single-digit integers in two ways, using the chip model and then using number lines. So notice this is intentional. We have the same numbers. We have all the different combinations. So let me just show you what this might look like. And I'm going to jump ahead. You want your students to notice this. If possible, ask them about it. But in general, we want them to see that when you have 5 positive chips and 3 positive chips, adding is combining. And notice we accumulate all of the chips. And you'll see what I mean by accumulating versus canceling in just a minute. So there's 8 chips, -5 and -3. Notice there's no plus or minus pairs that cancel each other out, so these chips of the same sign accumulate, but they're -8 of them. So then when we look at these two examples, same absolute values but different signs, well, what's going to happen? Okay, here's 5 and -3 negatives. When we combine them together, there's less negative chips, so all of the negatives are going to cancel or cancel to 0, and then we are left with 2 positive chips. Here, this is symmetric in a way. We have 5 negative chips and 3 positive chips. Okay? There's still less positive chips, meaning because 3 is smaller than the absolute value of 5. So all of these cancel. We're left with 2 negative chips. Okay, so yes, there's a rule. If they're the same sign, add the absolute values, keep the sign. If they're different signs, you subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value and keep the original sign of the number with the larger absolute value. Okay? But what's more useful than that terminology, which is pretty complex, is for them to be able to imagine these scenarios and imagine their chips in their head. And they'll have to draw them out a few times, but eventually they'll be able to reason this way. And rather than remembering, oh, we subtract, and then what's the sign, and then they also confuse it with multiplication and division, where they think since these are a positive and a negative, the result is always negative. So we really want to focus on this format of the chips and the action of combining and what happens, so that they learn how to add these integers without just relying on rules. Okay, and then with the number lines, a similar things happens. Sorry, I can't draw directly on the number lines, so I'm just going to show you the gist. Okay, so if we have 5 plus 3, I'm not going to draw all the tick marks, but we start at 0, we move 5 and 3 in the positive direction, so the 3 is added on to the 5. And notice we're accumulating in the positive direction, so there's no canceling out or reversing direction. And then if we have -5 plus -3, again, we start at 0, we move 5 in the negative direction, 3 in the negative direction, and we get -8. Okay? And then they should compare and contrast this with, if we have 5 plus -3, we start at 0. This is 5 in the positive direction. And then adding -3 is like taking away 3. And we get back to 2. Okay. So notice here what hopefully they'll be able to see if they think about this in terms of a number line is that they're going to move 5, and even though this -3 moves to the left, they're still going to be in the positive side of 0 since 3 is less than 5. Okay, and then they can notice that this is taking the difference. And then with the signs in reverse, starting at 0, they could go go to -5, or they could start at -5 if they want to. Think of starting at the first number rather than 0. So they're at -5, and then they're going to move 3 in the positive direction, which brings them to -2. And again, these ones, when they're the same side, the two values accumulate in the same direction. And in these ones, some of the opposite distances cancel out. Okay, so that goes or helps them see the addition of the absolute values and the subtraction of the absolute values without necessarily using all of the absolute value language. And okay, let's look at subtracting integers. Let's do this on a next video. See you at the next video.